Hello, I'm Lauren. Welcome back to my channel. It's so good to see you guys. Thank you guys for popping in. Today we're going to be talking about Scindapsus. These are often commonly called satin pothos. They're actually not pothos. What we call pothos isn't even pothos either, which most of you already know. I've talked about that. But these beauties are Scindapsus, and they have a couple of different problems. People tend to treat them like they treat their epipremnum and their pothos, and that can lead to some different issues. So we're going to go over that today. If you do need a full care guide on Scindapsus, you can go over to indoorgardening.com. They're an amazing company. I've been working for them for over 1.5 years now. Free resources, and I wrote an article on Scindapsus care, so you can go ahead and go and check that out. But today we're just going to specifically go over the problems of Scindapsus. So I'm just going to be pulling down random Scindapsus for you guys and showing you the problem and how to fix it. First one up, we're going to use the Scindapsus Trubii Moonlight. There are a couple of problems with this plant. I really love this plant. I've had this plant for several years. The biggest problem, other than it getting tangled up in my mic right now, is these right here, where they are leafless vines. They just push out vines and then they have no leaves on them whatsoever. These are called runners commonly. There's something that Scindapsus do. A lot of other trailing plants do it, like Monstera as well are known for doing this. Monstera do it for similar reasons to Scindapsus as well. The first reason that they can do this is water. If they dry out too much, then they won't have the energy. They'll have started to push out a vine and then you underwater them and they won't have the energy to give a particular leaf in each node. They'll just keep going and stretching out until they do. You can tell here we were going good, water, and then no water for a while. Another common reason I see why they do runners out there is lack of fertilizer. I personally don't find that to be an issue just because they're not heavy feeders. They survive off of very little. If I fertilize them or don't fertilize them, it doesn't seem to affect the runners. I think that's just a common thing that's out there that people list as a possible effect. It's not necessarily really a reason. So unless you haven't fertilized in like 6 months to a year, I wouldn't really consider that a reason. Also, the foliage is going to be misshaped before it starts putting out runners. So I don't really consider that the reasoning for this, honestly. I think that's just kind of like a fertilize your plants reminder. But the one thing that I definitely see affecting these runners the most is lighting. When the Scindapsus vines get tangled up here, then I'll notice that they don't get very much light to these particular nodes, and maybe it considers itself to be in the dark, or it won't be able to sustain the leaf if it puts it out, so it just doesn't give it a leaf. So I've noticed that if I don't turn on my grow lights, or if this gets like wound up in a dark area like under here and the leaves are blocking it, then it's not going to put out leaves on the vine. It just pushes out the vine. Another thing that I have noticed is, especially with the Scindapsus Trubii Moonlight, not necessarily with the other Scindapsus I have, but with the Trubii Moonlight in particular, having it trailing, it seems like it decides to stop putting out leaves because it's trailing. The leaves will size down quite a bit. If I wrap it up and I put it up like it actually has something to stabilize itself, then it's more likely to put out a leaf for me. You can see it's very full and bushy up top, which is really awesome. I love that. I'm not like cutting and putting cuttings back up in there or anything to make this a full pot. It's just deciding to sprout from the base and push out more. But then it's got all these vines that don't have anything. And even in the summertime when it's getting plenty of light and these vines are getting direct afternoon light, they're still not getting leaves put on them. So until they feel like they're supported. These are shingling plants, which means that they climb up the trees, and instead of just attaching their nodes, their little roots to the trees like a lot of other aroids do, these ones in particular will flatten their leaves up against the board or the tree themselves. And that's kind of how they sustain themselves. So they don't take up very much space. You're not going to have these huge petioles when it's flattening itself up like that. So it's actually spending energy to put out these petioles as well, and that's something that it wouldn't normally do if it was climbing. So I think that takes up a lot of energy, and that also prevents it from pushing out leaves on these nodes. One final note about runners before we move on. We talked about how to prevent them, but I know some of you are like, well, what do I do with the runners? Well, you can actually chop them off and it will promote more growth at the base, or your plant will go ahead and make a shoot on the side from the last node that it had on that runner, on that vine. And then you can just have these be wet sticks and chop them up in between each of these nodes here. And each of these little aerial roots, which are absorbing nutrients from the air. Aerial roots are very important. They will grow into full-blown soil roots for you, and you can start a whole new plant. As long as you have a node, you can just put them in a little prop box or whatever, and they will root that way. I know a lot of you already know that, but if you don't, now you do. The next common issue with Scindapsus is spots on the leaves. This Tribii Moonlight just happens to be the one that happens to have that. My others, I've managed to avoid it, but this one in particular has it right up here. You can see right here, and you can see right over here. You can see it on here as well. Sometimes it's mechanical damage, but for this one in particular, it is sunburn. It got way too much light. I have an afternoon light right over here. Afternoon sun shines directly on here. It was also very close to the grow light on this shelf in particular. Actually, I'm sorry, I moved it. So it was down here, and these leaves had gotten so big that they were touching the grow light up here. So when they have spots in the leaves, it's usually because it's getting too much sun like that. This is a sunburn. Another reason that they can get spots on the leaves is because they will have water sitting on the leaves. So if you're somebody that mists your plants, or if you happen to have another plant that likes to drip all over the place, sometimes it's, honestly, I'm just going to name names here. Okay, it's a philodendron. All right, it's the philodendron or the alocasia, sometimes the anthurium, but mainly the philodendron and the alocasia. They will have their little extra water coming off their leaves and dripping all over the place. It's basically like plant sweat. It took up too much water. There's other terms for it, but that's essentially what it is. And they'll drip it on the other plants, and in particular, the Scindapsus, if it sits on the leaves, they have pretty textured leaves. It doesn't always wash off and fall off, and sometimes they'll sit pretty flat and it won't be heavy enough, and that can cause some spots on the leaves as well. Peperomia are very prone to this too. It's just you can get little fungal and bacterial issues going on, and it'll make little spots on the leaves. Sometimes it won't be an issue and it'll just create a discolored spot on the one single leaf, no biggie. Other times it can actually be a full-blown infection and cause issues long-term. So just pay attention to any water sitting on the leaves, or if you can get a fan in your plant room and just kind of blow it around a little bit, that'll help prevent that as well. So the next common problem Scindapsus have is curling leaves. Generally speaking, curling leaves, I don't have any that are doing it right at this point, so I can't really show you. But generally speaking, curling leaves on a plant says that they're not getting enough moisture to have their leaves be open and out. That could be due to a couple of different things. Generally, root rot is the first thing to go and check for, of course, because that can destroy your plant. If your plant is not wet and it's clearly not root rot, then the next culprit is definitely going to be it just needs some water. It's probably got hydrophobic soil, it's in a terracotta pot and drying out too fast. Something is causing that moisture to wick away. It needs to be watered more often. You could have it in too much of a well-draining mix, or it just needs more water. Things like that, the common basic watering problems are going to be the issue with the curling leaves for the most part. There is occasionally root rot, but that's not generally a really big issue with them. Most of the time, it is going to be a watering issue. And then, so this lovely Scindapsus argyrius is going to be our next two problems. This looks like a very beautiful and healthy plant, and you're absolutely right. It is very beautiful, it's very healthy. It's also 3 plants that I potted together all in one, and they all don't fit in the top properly. They're just kind of vining down and going down, and they're still doing their thing. But the next common problem that happens with Scindapsus is it starts to lose its silver. So you can see some of them have quite a bit of silver. Here is a good look at what this leaf should look like. Whoop, there you go. Here's a good look at what this leaf should look like. But then you end up with ones like this where they don't have very much silver at all. And the reason for that is they're not getting enough light. That silver is actually variegation that is meant to protect the leaves and reflect light back out. So I know when you hear variegation, you think like white variegation, yellow variegation. This is a silver variegation. It's a protective measure like sunblock that Scindapsus uses. They are a lower light plant. As you can see, I have them up here. They're just getting grow light mainly from a light fixture that's like 4 feet away. So they're not getting very much light at all, and they're still continuing to grow. But they're starting to lose that silver variegation, and that's because they're just not getting enough light. They need more light in order to keep that silver variegation. In order to feel like they need more sunblock and reflective features, they just need more light. So some people like it with just like the little polka dots and not very much light at all. And that's fine. That's great. But if you want more, then you got to give it more light. Just be careful to slowly acclimate them to more light so you don't end up with the sunburn that we talked about before. And last but not least on the list of Scindapsus problems, yellowing leaves. This is actually a crispy leaf. Here is, I'm just dropping dirt everywhere. Here is a yellowing leaf. 1 yellow leaf, 2 yellow leaf, not that big a deal. You should have 1 or 2 per vine every couple of months or so. Depending on how quickly your plant is growing, it is going to get rid of the older foliage that it's simply lived its life. That's normal, that's fine. But if you have yellowing leaves kind of sprinkled in all over the place and is down the whole vine here and there, then chances are it's a watering issue. Probably let it dry out way too much, or it's been watered way too much, way too often, and it got overwatered, and that's why it's yellowing. So you can simply stick your finger in the soil to check and see. This is a common issue in a lot of different plants. It's just Scindapsus tend to be very in your face with it. It's not just 1 yellow leaf or 2 yellow leaves. They'll be like, here's a bunch of yellow leaves, help, fix. And that's totally fine. You're not like a bad plant parent or anything for it. We've all done it. We've all done that. I'm trying to find, like, here's a yellow leaf right here. And I feel like because Scindapsus tend to be green and silver, and they'll either be very muted, or they'll have a lot of foliage in general, or they'll have very dark foliage. All of these things tend to make a bright yellow leaf just pop out at you, and it can tend to look worse than it actually is. So if you want your Scindapsus to look just a little bit better, just go ahead and like take off the yellowing leaves. No biggie. You can leave them on while they still have green, because if they still have green on them, then they're still taking energy from that old leaf, putting it into the rest of the plant. But as soon as it's all yellow, it should gently just pop right off. Or you can wait until it's dried and brown and crispy. It just depends aesthetically and what you feel your plant needs personally at this point in time. I'm going to put this big beauty back up here. And note that this one doesn't have any runners. And that's because I've really stayed on top of the watering and done everything that I was supposed to do for it. And the trailing has not caused very much runners with this one, but it has caused larger internodal spacing where there is a longer vine in between each leaf. And the leaves are getting smaller as they go down because they are a climbing plant. They're not supposed to be trailing. So those are some things to note as well when you're deciding on what you want to do with your Scindapsus and whether things are a problem or not. Hopefully this helps you a little bit if you've had some concerns with your Scindapsus. If there are Scindapsus problems that I missed, please drop them down in the comments below. Be sure to check out indoorgardening.com for more information. They are an amazing resource. I've been working with them for a long time, like I told you before. I do have that Scindapsus care article over there. It does address some of these problems, but not all of them. And it talks about how often to water, temperatures they like, all that good stuff. So definitely go check that out. Be sure to subscribe, like this video if it was helpful at all for you. Got lots more good stuff coming out for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!